Think about everything you've eaten this year. Chicken, beef, pork, maybe some salmon or shrimp. Ordinary stuff. Now ask yourself something strange. When was the last time you ate a wolf, a lion, a shark, an eagle? Chances are never. Not once, not even out of curiosity. And that's odd because these animals are made of meat too. Real, edible, protein-rich muscle, no different in basic biology from a cow or a pig. So why does almost every human culture on Earth, separated by oceans and thousands of years, arrive at the exact same unspoken rule? Don't eat the predators. This isn't a law written down anywhere. Nobody sat you down and explained it. And yet the instinct runs so deep that most people have never even thought to ask the question until right now. So let's actually answer it. Because the reasons turn out to be written into arithmetic, biology, and the oldest fears our species ever carried. Start with the math, because the math is brutal. Energy doesn't move cleanly through nature. When a plant captures sunlight and turns it into leaves, only a small slice of that energy survives being eaten by a rabbit. And when a fox eats that rabbit, only a small slice of the rabbit's energy survives into the fox. Scientists call this the 10% rule, and it's remarkably consistent. At every step up the food chain, roughly 90% of the available energy simply evaporates as heat and effort. A field of grass might support thousands of rabbits. Those rabbits might support a few dozen foxes. And an ecosystem that size might only support one or two wolves at the very top. Now think about what that means for a hunter deciding what to kill. A deer or a bison sits low on that pyramid, close to the plants that fed it, packed with energy that hasn't been burned away yet. A wolf or a big cat sits at the very top, and by the time you reach it, most of the usable energy in that animal has already been spent chasing, killing, and digesting everything below it. In blunt terms, a predator is a much smaller meal than its size suggests, and it costs far more effort to bring down. For a species doing constant survival math, hunting a top predator was almost never worth the risk for the return. And risk is the right word because predators don't go down easy. A deer runs from you. A wolf or a lion fights back, and it fights with claws, teeth, and a body built entirely for combat. Early humans who specialized in hunting apex predators paid for it in blood, and a species can't build a stable food source around meals that regularly kill the people gathering them. Prey animals were the safer, steadier, more abundant option, and over enormous stretches of time, cultures simply organized themselves around the food source that didn't fight back as hard. But energy and risk are only the first layer. The second reason is something almost nobody thinks about, and it's a quiet, invisible threat: contamination. Predators don't just eat one meal and stop. They eat prey animal after prey animal over the course of their lives, and anything harmful in that prey doesn't disappear. It accumulates. Heavy metals, toxins, parasites, and pathogens tend to build up as you move higher along the food chain, a process scientists call biomagnification. This is exactly why modern health guidelines warn people to limit consumption of large predatory fish like shark and swordfish, animals sitting near the top of the ocean's food chain, carrying decades of accumulated mercury in their tissue from every smaller fish they ever consumed. A land predator carries a version of the same risk. Wolves, bears, and big cats are far more likely to be infected with parasites like trichinella, a microscopic worm that causes trichinosis, a disease that can cause muscle pain, swelling, and in severe cases, death. Prey animals that eat mostly plants carry a dramatically lower parasite load than animals that have spent a lifetime eating other animals. Ancient people almost certainly couldn't explain any of this in scientific terms, but they didn't need the science. They only needed the pattern. Communities that avoided predator meat got sick less often and buried fewer people than communities that didn't. And that kind of lesson gets learned the hard way, then passed down as an unquestioned rule that outlives the explanation behind it. There's an even sharper example of this danger one explorers ran into again and again in the Arctic: polar bear liver. To early explorers desperate for food in the far north, a fresh kill's liver looked like an obvious source of nutrition. Instead, it very nearly killed them. Polar bear liver contains an almost unbelievable concentration of vitamin A, so extreme that eating even a modest portion can trigger a poisoning called hypervitaminosis A, causing violent headaches, skin peeling off in sheets, and, in the worst cases, death. Predators concentrate certain compounds to levels no plant-eating animal ever reaches, and those concentrations can turn what looks like food into something closer to poison. Then there's the third reason, and this one is simpler but no less important. Predator meat, by most accounts throughout history, just tastes bad. Animals built for chasing down prey are lean, muscular, and constantly active. And that kind of tissue tends to be tough, stringy, and low in the fat that makes meat tender and flavorful. Worse, the muscle of a hunting animal is often saturated with byproducts of stress and exertion, adrenaline, and built-up lactic acid from a life spent sprinting and fighting. Many predator species also carry an intense, musky quality in their meat and fat, a smell tied to the strong scent glands so many carnivores rely on for marking territory and communication. None of that makes for an appealing meal. Compare that to a grazing prey animal, calm, well-fed on plants, carrying marbled fat built up specifically to survive lean seasons. That's the animal that becomes dinner. That's the animal whose flavor keeps people coming back. Taste, it turns out, was quietly steering our species away from danger the entire time, long before anyone understood why. But there's a fourth layer to this, and it isn't about biology at all. It's about the mind. Across cultures with no contact with one another at all, the same belief kept surfacing again and again. You become what you eat. Eat the flesh of something fierce, and some of that ferocity, that unpredictability, that danger gets passed into you. This wasn't viewed as a reward. It was viewed as a threat. Predators occupied a strange psychological space in the ancient world. They weren't simply food. They were rivals. Humans and wolves competed for the very same deer. Humans and lions competed for the very same herds. A predator wasn't prey waiting to be claimed. It was a competitor to be driven off, killed in self-defense, or avoided altogether. And killing a rival out of necessity is an entirely different act than killing a meal out of hunger. So pull all four threads together, and the picture becomes clear. The energy math made predator meat a poor return on enormous risk. The contamination made it a quiet, invisible danger passed down as instinct long before anyone had a word for parasites or toxins. The taste made it unappealing on its own terms, no explanation required. And the ancient rivalry between hunters turned eating a predator into something closer to a violation than a meal. None of these forces needed to be written down. They only needed to be lived, generation after generation, until avoiding predator meat stopped being a decision and simply became who we are. So the next time you're standing in a grocery store, looking at a shelf of chicken breasts and ground beef, understand what you're really looking at, not just dinner. The end result of 100,000 years of trial, error, sickness, and hard-earned instinct, quietly deciding, meal after meal, exactly what was safe to become.